So Carole Malone and Liam Thorpe here with me to go through some of those headlines. And Carole, you want to kick off with the Metro, and the headline there is "There's no quick fix." This is a warning from a sage advisor to the government, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Jeremy Farrar, who's a senior government advisor. What he's basically saying is that, Boris was going to make his lockdown exit strategy public on February the 22nd. And Jeremy Farrar is basically saying, don't do that. It doesn't make any sense. But, Boris has got to stop being led by scientists. It is not a scientist's job to dictate government policy. Boris has got to listen to the science, yes, but, COVID deaths are down by a third currently. The case rate is down by 70%. We're currently doing 1,000 injections every minute or something? Yes, 1,000 vaccinations a minute. And death rates are tumbling, infection rates are tumbling. What do these scientists want? Do they want a world where there is zero COVID? Because we know that is never going to happen. They're saying there's no quick fix, but we have to get out of lockdown. Scientists have already said that this COVID is going to be endemic, but every time there's talk of easing restrictions, they keep on bringing up another variant, the Kent variant, the Bristol variant. It'll be the Scunthorpe variant next. Viruses always mutate. So far, there have been 4,000 variants identified, COVID variants. Unless they're going to kill us, unless they don't work against our current vaccines, don't keep telling the population and terrorizing us, because it is not an option to stay in lockdown permanently. And I think this is just yet another way for the scientists to keep us in lockdown. Boris has to start leading soon. He's our leader. He's got to decide when we come out of lockdown, not the scientists.
You're shaking your head, Liam. What do you make of that?
Carole won't be surprised to hear me disagree with absolutely everything that she just said there. I don't really understand this argument about why the scientists would want to keep us in lockdown. I often get accused of wanting people to stay in lockdown because I think it's the right thing at this exact moment. Nobody wants to be in lockdown. It's a terrible thing, but for everyone. I think what I'm really concerned about is the same mistakes being repeated again. Carole says that we shouldn't be led by the scientists. Well, actually, the government has not listened to the scientists too many times before. In September, Sage said that we needed to go into a lockdown at that exact moment. Boris Johnson delayed, and we ended up in a bad situation again. If we come out too early, we will just end up in lockdown again. We desperately need this to be the last lockdown.
We have a vaccination, Liam. What is the point of the vaccine rollout if we're going to stay in perpetual lockdown? Once we have vaccinated all the vulnerable people, what's the problem?
We're not going to stay in perpetual lockdown, but we need to get as many people vaccinated as possible and bring the rates right down, because unfortunately the NHS will just come back under severe pressure again.
The pressure is easing on the NHS.
From personal experience, it is easing. But if we came out now, for example, in Liverpool, the infection rate is still 260 cases per 100,000 people. If we came out now, that would explode again. It's already much higher than when Leicester went into lockdown in the summer, for example. So the case rates are still very, very, very high. Yes, we're starting to see them come down, although they've plateaued a little bit recently.
They're not coming down, they're tumbling. And Boris was going to make his announcement on February the 22nd. Things are changing very quickly now. And he shouldn't be put off from making announcements on the 22nd, because the situation is changing daily. It's getting better daily.
What happened with Christmas? He overpromised in late November, told everybody that we're going to have a 5-day free-for-all at Christmas. And look, I think even you, Carole, would have to admit that it was an absolute disaster. And we saw an explosion in cases in January. And we've now had, in parts of the country, we've had the deadliest month of the pandemic. We want to avoid ever having to go through that again. And if that means having to stay in this process a little...
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Liam, but I was just going to move us on to the next story because it is connected. And Carole, this is in the Daily Telegraph. They're saying a school return date must be signed in blood and inverted commas. And presumably this is pressure from Boris Johnson's backbenchers, worry that that date of March the 8th that's been mooted might slip.
Yes, and this is the point here, because, and with what Farrar has said tonight, and probably the other sage people will back him up on what he has said tonight, what MPs are worried about is this is going to put off Boris reopening the schools on March the 8th. And they're trying to persuade Boris not to make any announcement on the 22nd. I think it could be the 22nd or any time that week. And they're trying to persuade him not to do that. Which means that date for the opening of schools may slip. You know, we can't keep schools closed. Now, Boris is going to have a lot of trouble anyway getting the schools reopened. Because of the union opposition, they're making incredible demands before teachers go back to school full time. I mean, some of them are unreasonable demands. I mean, especially when we see a lot of public service workers have been at work throughout lockdown and have not complained the way the teaching unions have. But, you know, we have got to get our children back to school. We can't keep putting off. It's been nearly a year now, and a year out of education is massive in a child's life.
Well, yes, and the government has all along, Liam, talked about it being a priority to get kids into school if at all possible, but there does seem to be a lot of caution this time round. There does seem to be a lot of concern about infection rates.
I'm actually pleased that for the first time in this whole crisis, I think that the Prime Minister is adopting a more cautious approach. I completely understand and I completely agree that the absolute priority is to get kids back into school as soon as possible, because certainly for many in deprived areas, online learning is just not a possibility. We're going to see that attainment gap grow in ways that we really don't need to. However, as I've said before, if we move too quickly, then we end up in another lockdown, and you know that's the last thing any of us need. That's the last thing our kids need. That's the last thing anybody needs. So I am actually pleased to see a little bit more caution from the Prime Minister than we have seen in previous times. I think it's now widely assumed that we were too late into the first lockdown, too late into the second, too late into the third, and we're now paying for that.
All of those lockdowns, we didn't have the vaccine. Now we have the vaccine. Why are we being super cautious when we've already vaccinated most of our vulnerable people? In the next few weeks, we're going to have vaccinated everyone to 50. After that, we should not be
quick come back on that, Liam.
There's still a lot of questions about the current impact of the vaccine. You heard Patrick Vallon say it the other day. We need to see what its effects are on transmissibility. We need to see what its effects are on death rate. Obviously, things are looking good in that department, but if we move too quickly, we don't know what's going to happen. We do not want to end up in this situation again. So a little bit more caution now is what's needed, and then hopefully we're all in a better position in a few months' time.
I am not applauding the Easter Bunny.
Really? Fucking hell.